Welcome to Real Estate Coaching Radio, starring award-winning real estate coaches and #1 international best-selling authors, Tim and Julie Harris. This is the #1 daily radio show for realtors looking for a no BS, authentic, real-time coaching experience. What's really working in today's market, how to generate more leads, make more money, and have more time for what you love in your life. And now your hosts, Tim and Julie Harris.
And we're back. It is July 12th, and this is technically day 7 of the Harris U.S. tour. And we are about to leave Estes Park, Colorado.
Correct.
And we're Julie's like quizzing me. Truthfully, I have no idea where we are.
It's a lot of driving. You've done a lot of driving.
And yeah, you know how many miles we've done already?
I think over 1,000 something.
13, almost 1,400 miles since we left in Dallas. Yeah. And the Audi RS6 Avant is doing fantastic.
It is.
Yes, we gave it a name.
Artie.
I think we christened it Artie after the salesman that sold us the Audi. The Audi salesman named Artie.
Indeed.
He must have planned that from birth.
Probably. Artie the Audi.
So we are leaving on our way to where?
Jackson Hole, Wyoming is next.
Which is a total of how long? How many miles?
It's going to be, I didn't count the miles, but 8.5 to 9.5 hours through the mountains. We'll see how it goes, but that's the big plan for tomorrow.
Right. That'll be probably.
Which is most of Wyoming.
Right. One of our last big day-long drives, I would think, that we'll have for a while, because we're going to stay how many days in Jackson Hole? 4 days in Jackson Hole. And then after we're in Jackson Hole, do you have any idea where we're going next?
Yet.
You don't know.
No.
So the only thing we know for sure is the next real stop we have is going to be in about a month in Central California.
Yes.
For Monterey Car Week.
Between Jackson Hole and there, who knows? We'll see how it goes.
Who knows, right?
Yeah.
So we had someone invite us up to Canada. It was right on the border above Montana.
Which is great.
We might, who knows?
Yes.
Honestly. We do want to go to Yellowstone.
Yes. So Jackson Hole, Grand Teton, and Yellowstone will be our next week's worth of travels.
Right. Because the little Sprug obviously hasn't been in Yellowstone.
Exactly.
And it's kind of funny as we're blasting past all these beautiful, mountains and scenes, and we saw a moose yesterday.
Yeah, that was awesome.
We put by the way, we're posting pictures and videos on Instagram at timandjulieharris.com. So if you're not, if you're at all curious about our 2-month-long, we are thinking probably 20-state U.S. tour. You can obviously follow us along on timandjulieharris.com. But it is kind of funny to watch Zoe in the back seat at 7.5 years old, who she's essentially just plucking away at her devices or growling about
pine cones,
playing or her stuffed animals and then here we go past the moose and we have to point it out to her. She's like, "Oh, cool,
that's
moose."
7.5. Can I pet him?
Yeah, exactly. Well,
Yes.
so far, Julie, what are your observations? Because we've been this is Real Estate Coaching Radio, the nation's #1 real estate podcast, and as such, we have been paying close attention to any of the real estate things we found along the way. Oh, and by the way, today we're going to start a multi-day series on an incredible article that just came out that Julie and I are going to be reading to you guys and discussing on this podcast, but obviously we're going to stick with our travel theme primarily. So what's surprised you so far?
Yeah, well, I have to say oftentimes with our coaching members and sometimes podcast members who email or we talk to, there's a theme of sometimes they're stuck getting ready to get started and they want to study some things more and they feel like I've got to know this before I can do that. And we always, as coaches, say, even if you think that you know everything about real estate, which is impossible, you got to let that thought go. There's always going to be something that surprises you. You think you saw it all, and then something sneaks up on you, and that happened to me in Taos. I don't think you had ever seen this thing called Earthship biotecture.
Absolutely not.
Okay, so we're leaving Taos on the way here to Estes Park, and we saw one kind of funky-looking Earth plus solar house sunken into the side of it, like kind of the plains, beginning of mountains.
Basically, it looked like if the hobbits were essentially aliens making houses
homes
in the middle of nowhere.
Yes, with probably, 5 to 20 acres surrounding it, somewhere in there. And we thought, well, that's interesting. And then we drove another minute or two, and then there was another one, and another one, and another one. And this was an entire, I don't know that you would call it a subdivision, but certainly
it was a community.
A community, and I don't know how many hundred there were,
Went
but
on
there was
for
a
miles,
lot. It
yeah.
went on for miles and miles, and so we finally saw a sign that said Earthship biotecture.
Right.
Which I had never heard of before. I don't think you'd ever heard of before.
If
We'd certainly never sold any of these.
If we'd heard of them, we would have stayed just to have the experience on a
Yes.
VRBO, of which there's plenty there.
That's right.
And we did search to find out what you guys have got to go online and see pictures of these. You won't believe them.
Yeah, they're called super sustainable buildings via thermal dynamics and passive solar. And I have to say, the skeptic in me was like, sure, that's just a kid out of the box.
Well, let's break that down. So thermodynamics means obviously they're harvesting, the cooling capacities of being built into the ground. And they are. Remember I said these are like, futuristic hobbit houses. And so when you look at these things, they're buried into the ground. And then the whole roof structure of what you can barely, it's all solar panels.
Yeah, and they have 6 elements. So this was, I was a little skeptical, thinking, what kind of craziness is this? This just looks really bizarre to me. It kind of looked like what was that, Dune or something? One of those movies, because it was so different, right?
Are
then
you
I
saying
looked it up.
It looked dystopian to you?
I don't know what It was one of those things where I had nothing to compare it to, so I didn't know what to think. And then I looked it up, and they're actually extremely well organized, put together, and experienced. They have 6 things that go into these houses: clean water, energy, food, shelter, sewage treatment, and garbage management. These are completely 100% self-sufficient, off-the-grid homes.
But that goes to a theme that you and I noticed we started talking about really when COVID really became a thing, right? And you started seeing these mass migrations out of city centers and all of that.
Yeah.
And so the point being is that Julie and I were essentially throwing spitballs at the idea that because of the advent, I just said spitballs, and Zoe gave me a dirty look, and now she's rolling her eyes looking at me.
Yeah.
No, Zoe, it's not okay to throw spitballs. But with the advent of Starlink and all this other technology, and now you discover that indeed there are completely off-the-grid homes. And the only thing that wasn't off the grid in a lot of these houses, if I remember correctly, is they actually had water storage tanks. They had to bring in their own water.
That's right.
But as far as their, the heat and the electric, all sorts of, you can run your house completely off electric. If they had
With
solar
solar
panels and battery backups
That's
and
right,
the
lots
whole
of
thing.
batteries.
So that's cool.
Yeah, so if you wanted to check this out, go to earthbiotecture.com. You could even rent one to try it out.
So what answering my own question, one of the things that I'm kind of learning from that I thought was not surprising, but very interesting, right? From a humanistic sort of observational perspective. There you go. Thank you very much. Is how each of these communities, and we're traveling sometimes 8 hours, like tomorrow, between one city and one community and one state to another. The way that people look, dress, and act is more distinct than I honestly remember.
Yes.
And I love it, to be honest with you, because
it's very distinct.
In the cities, everything's the same. Right?
Sure. I mean, Dallas is not that different than Atlanta, for example.
Exactly. Or not that different from, say, for example, any other city of similar size. You go to Orange County in Dallas, Texas.
Not that different.
Not that different. And that's the thing that I'm really finding incredibly invigorating on the sojourn, is that still exists in our country. And I love it.
Especially
I really
the smaller and medium-sized towns do really have their own
They
theme.
haven't lost it, and they're fighting for it. You can tell.
That's right. And some of them feel more casual. Some of them are more artist colonies. Some of them have some other theme going. But you can definitely tell a feel for a community. Even, we noticed going to gas stations.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's a different feel for whether they're like pro-traveler, anti-traveler, hyper-local or not. So, it's just interesting studying humans, I suppose.
Right. All the way down to their mannerisms, how they, and you can definitely get the vibe with different, political leanings in communities.
That's true too.
And the mask is really the best way of knowing what sort of the political leanings are. And obviously when in Rome, we whipped our masks out when we had to stop in different areas. But it's, I guess the other thing was fascinating, again, just being observational, is the different ways people are, in different communities, how they have their hair differently.
Yeah.
And like here, when where were we before this? We were in
Taos.
Taos, right?
Roswell.
So in Taos, basically, it's like I would say an upper middle class, mostly hippie colony.
Yeah.
Would you?
Definitely.
Am I summarizing it correctly?
No, absolutely. Well, I mean, it is known as an artist community. There were a lot of famous artists there in museums and things like that. So it's got that do your own thing artist sort of hippie flair to it.
Like every fifth store sells Birkenstocks. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, then we drive here, and it doesn't have that same vibe, but it's still, there's an element of it here.
Outdoorsy, but it's more of like mountains and hiking and adventure.
Well, Estes Park, I thought, where we are now, feels very, very touristy.
Yeah, well, there's about 5 million candy shops, much to Zoe's delight.
Candy shops, art gallery, t-shirt shops, and this is very touristy. So of all the places we've been so far, Estes Park, we haven't been here long enough, has, I think, the least distinct feel of all the communities we've been to.
I mean,
and
Roswell
if you live,
is all about aliens.
And if you live here and we're completely, getting this wrong, forgive us. We're just passing through. And
First impressions.
Right, first impressions. But let's talk about this, the amazing hotel.
Yes. what is it? The Stanley.
The Stanley.
That's right.
The Stanley Hotel.
Where The Shining was written and filmed, I believe.
Well, he was motivated by it.
Motivated.
So if you guys remember the movie from the 70s called The Shining, with Jack Nicholson in it and Red Room, and all of that.
Yes.
I mean, so that's
Creepy.
that's the hotel, and it's a magnificent hotel that was built by the Stanley Steamer family, and then prior to that, they actually were competitor. They created essentially the ability to take pictures, and they sold that to Kodak, right? And so this was money that was basically created in the 20s and the 30s.
Came from the East Coast, moved out here.
Massachusetts.
Primarily for tuberculosis treatment, because back then they didn't know what to do about that except for fresh air.
Mr. Stanley had tuberculosis, and his doctor, because they didn't know what the heck to do, told him to move out here. And he did, and he brought all of his fortune with him, and he built this just ridiculous hotel.
It's magnificent.
Yeah.
So if you are ever in this part of the country, that's a great place to investigate. And if you have an inkling towards, ghost adventures, there's some things that you might want to research online about that too.
Of course. Well, you're in the part of the world where there's lots of ghosts.
Indeed.
And so we want to thank all of you who have been sending us travel suggestions and just little hamburger joints and things like that on Instagram. We've been reading all of the comments, and we appreciate it. And it's fun. So let's talk about something real estate-y, because frankly, not having done a real estate-based podcast in our normal genre is giving
hives.
Yeah, well, I love doing it, so it is giving me some hives.
Yes.
So this is an article that we're going to share with you guys, and this is an article that came out. Now I'm going to give you a warning. This is the only warning I'm going to give you about this. So please bear with us. I know some of you, and I don't know why, to be honest with you, some of you take offense when we talk about EXP Realty. And again, we're going to read an article, and we're going to also post a link to the article in the description of today's podcast. So it'll be on iTunes, Stitcher, it'll be on our main website, timandjulieharris.com. I want you to listen to this article, and Julie's going to read. You can kind of skip some of it.
Sure.
It's too wonkish, but Julie's going to read it. And I want you to think of it from a perspective of investing. And that's how I have an open mind. Like, so for example, if you knew, for example, like Julie and I were pre-IPO Facebook investors, and that was a great investment. And then imagine if you'd been able to buy, Julie and I bought, I mean, this is because we're not spring chickens. Right. We bought Google when it went public. We were able to, but Apple, right? Well, we didn't buy Apple when it went public, but we have Apple shares that go all the way back.
Fairly early. Yeah.
We've owned Apple shares for basically 30 years, right? So, that's the perspective I want you to keep in mind as Julie's reading this article, because the premise of this article, I'll give you the bottom line first, is the stock ticker symbol EXPI might very well be one of the best investments in forever. And so again, this is about EXP Realty. It's about Verbella, and it's about essentially the competition and all that. Julie and I are not whatever disclaimer we have to give here. We're not financial advisors. We're not stock pickers. We do have EXPI stock. And again, just listen to this with an open mind, because some of the points this guy made, and again, he's not a real estate agent. He's not in the industry. He is an investor. From what I can tell, he runs other people's money, meaning he probably runs a private equity fund.
Yeah, that's right. And remember, even if you're not yet an EXP agent, you can invest in EXPI stock.
Sure.
So even if you're not thinking quite yet, because eventually they'll all come around to it, think about it from your investment standpoint, because this is largely focusing on that. And again, this is not an agent or a broker. This is an investment guy. Okay,
right. And we're not pitching you on EXP. We just want you to listen to this, because it's been our premise. And this is Julie and I aligned with EXP in January of 2019. And we did that because we believed that EXP was in perfect alignment, or maybe we were in perfect alignment with EXP's core mission. And one of the, just going back in time a little bit, just so you guys know what motivated us to do this originally, is that real estate coaching and training we were only able to really solve half the problem for our clients. The other half of the problem was on the fact that they were with traditional real estate brokerages. There was no mechanism in place for them to build wealth unless they bought real estate and did other investing. There was no mechanism in place for to usually own any equity in the brokerages they worked with. So Julie and I were always left with this sort of incomplete feeling as real estate coaches, because we couldn't deliver a complete solution to our clients until EXP. And when we learned more about how EXP works and how it benefits agents in a very real financial sense, it's not commission splits, it's not things like that. Well, it's all those things. But listen to what this analyst had to say about the stock, and then open your mind.
Especially because he's coming from outside of our normal world.
I
think.
And he gives pluses. He gives both sides of the argument too.
I'm going to start with his initial quote, because I think that this defines stocks can be intimidating to people who don't do it all the time. And I think he very nicely defines what you should be looking for. He said, few companies come around during an investor's lifetime that have a probable chance of changing one's life if enough capital is allocated to it. These companies have a rare combination of extremely high economics, are run by high-quality, incentivized owner-operators, have defensible characteristics, high consistent growth with potential to continue high growth, and are trading at a fair price. Okay, so he says that EXP World Holdings, otherwise known as EXPI, is his next bet. Let's see, where do you want me to jump in next?
Whatever you feel is that these guys will be interested in.
Okay, he says, I feel EXPI has that rare combination of great economics run by high quality incentivized owner operators, emphasis on plural because, agents in EXP are owner operators, has defensible characteristics, high consistent growth with absolutely monumental runway for growth, and investors are totally overlooking the opportunity, which means it's still priced reasonably.
It's priced on the, again, he's suggesting
he says it's priced at a pittance of where he thinks it'll be in a decade's time. Okay, so the opportunity...
So let's level up there. Let's get some perspective. Yep. So EXP Realty right now has close to 60,000 agents. He's saying 57,000 agents. I'm sure that's accurate. And based on the current monthly net growth of EXP, there will be about 75,000 agents worldwide. And I forget off the top of my head, I'm sorry for not knowing this, EXP agents, but I believe EXP is now in 15 different countries. It might be on the way to 15 different countries, but you're talking about Colombia, Mexico, Spain, Australia, Portugal, Canada, obviously, just all over the place.
Everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's the Michael Valdez, who's in charge of international expansion, is obviously been a very busy man.
Indeed, and will continue to be, I'm sure. So this investor goes on to say, EXPI is providing in real time a masterclass in the superpower of incentives. I am betting that EXPI takes the lead in the disruption of the real estate industry. They attract the best agents, align them all to think like owners, and pass the savings on to the consumer. The world is unequivocally better off because of EXPI. Furthermore, you get lots of optionality. He says, I bet Glenn Sanford and company throw in a few Amazon-like surprises along the way. So I think he's saying that it's still innovating, of course.
Yep.
Let's see. So should we go on to
Let me read what
he does a little history of the...
No, that's good. I think that's interesting.
Okay, so again, coming from an investor standpoint, he's studying this as somebody from the outside. And I think that's really valuable for agents that are kind of always in our own world, agents and brokers and coaches, to hear this. So he goes on to say the current real estate industry has been around for roughly 100 years. Agent commissions are roughly 5 to 6% on sales. Many people begrudgingly pay the price, but good real estate agent skills are still worth a lot. Real estate brokers traditionally have taken 40 to 50%, give or take, of the commission split. This is where bloat and redundant costs in agent commissions are found. Brokerages have been brick and mortar establishments where agents have an office where they learn and congregate. Real estate, however, is done in the field. Many agents operate from home. The value of a traditional brokerage has been eroding. Technology is enabling agents to work remotely. The traditional brokerage is not worth as much as it once was. And I do think that COVID probably accelerated that since everyone had to work from home.
So let me answer a few questions because here's where people are going to start getting confused because I can understand why.
Sure.
EXP is not a franchise, and Julie's going to be getting into the economic model here in a second. That's really important. EXP is one essentially now national, international brokerage. So every state has brokers usually in every state. And when you work for EXP, you work legally for that broker in that particular state. But what you're really doing is working for the one national real estate brokerage. Again, not a franchise. So many of the big brands and the franchising model really took off in the 1970s with really maybe even late 60s with franchises. And when you have a franchise, and again, I'm not going to step on the next point. Okay. When you have a franchise, like Julie and I, we knew the guy who was selling a lot of the franchises for RE/MAX back in back in the 80s, and he was selling franchises all over the Midwest. And then we knew a lot of people were selling Keller Williams franchises, and this was in the 90s. And the way that would work basically is someone would buy Linda and Jim McKissick, for example, friends of ours from Howard Brinton. Okay, so Linda and Jim, I think they bought 5 states. So they bought the region of Kentucky, Ohio. Maybe it was 4 states. It was somewhere in there. So Linda and Jim bought, and I'm explaining the economic model of a franchise. Great, wonderful people. Julie and I love them. We'll love them forever. So they bought this region for Keller Williams. They bought it from Keller Williams. So they, we're essentially, buying this big multi-state region. Now their job was to go out there and sell franchises. So their jobs, now I'm explaining this to you guys. I want you to see how this model works. So you have corporate, then you have regional. the regional, again, my mind is fighting with my wanting to explain all the other people that are in the middle. I'm trying to simplify it. But you have corporate, and then you have these people that own the different regions, and then you have the franchise holders. Now, what I'm skipping is in between each of those three cogs, there's also a lot of other people that are getting paid. This is the reason you have to understand. This is the reason that EXPI is so profitable for the sake of real estate agents. Yeah. And so what you have then is you have franchises. So when Julie and I, like Linda and Jim, stayed at our house when they were trying to sell franchises for Keller Williams back in the 90s. And we talked to them many times. We were thinking about helping them start a Keller Williams franchise in Columbus, which we never decided to do. But the point is that you have a franchise. Now, when the person starts a franchise, then they have to rent office space, and they have all these fixed costs. They have obviously a well-run brokerage like Keller Williams, where everything's done at a very high standard. You're going to have incredible fixed costs. And I don't remember, our Sean Kokoska told me once, I think he said the average Keller Williams franchise, and don't hold me to this, I think I'm remembering correctly, has a fixed monthly cost of over $100,000 a month. I think it was like $108,000 or some obscure number. Yeah. And so the point being is that's money that's going just to keep the brokerage operational. Now, and again, I want you to think about this. Inside the actual franchise, then, you have the office manager, you have the team lead, you have the other thing, all these individual roles, all these people who have jobs who are all there to help run that particular brokerage. And then remember all the people that are getting, so when a real estate agent, when Bob sells a house, right, and Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and he's at Jackson Hole, Wyoming, Keller Williams, that money that he is from the commission that's generated from that sale is getting shared obviously with Bob for having made the sale, but all the other people and all the other things that are between Bob and corporate. And so that's the reason a lot of times these franchises, what happens is they have additional fees. It's not just about commission splits in a traditional franchise model. It's about, your commission split is this, but now you have your annual, 6% this, your royalty fee, and you have your this and your other thing. They have to charge those fees so the people that own the franchises can actually make a profit. And if you have a market like this where you're seeing commissions erode, especially in the buyer agent side, then you're looking at even more of a business model that's under a lot of stress.
That's right.
And enter EXP. And this is the reason this guy is thinking that EXP is such a disruptive model, because EXP is virtual, has is not a franchise, and all the people that would have been in between Bob making that sale and all those other people, they're not part of the conversation.
No, they're not necessary.
Right. There's no franchise holder. There's no region holder. There's no corporate office. So go ahead.
That's right. So he goes on to say that the best agents already have established books of business, and a majority are paying that big chunk of their commission to a traditional broker. Few, if any, have any ownership incentive in their current brokerage model. Now, Julie, you guys might want to grab a pencil because we're going to do a little bit of math.
And did you know that it's still a vast majority of the real estate brokerages in the United States, at the least, maybe even the world, are still non-franchise independent brokerages?
Yes.
They're Tim and Julie real estate type deals? Yeah.
That's right. Okay, so, that includes a lot of brokers.
I think it's 60% too.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So EXP comes around and offers this. Again, you might want to get your typing fingers out or jot down some notes here. Okay, EXP says we'll take 20% of the commission. You get 80%. But
up to a $16,000 cap.
Once you've paid that $16,000 to EXPI, then you get 100%. You deserve it. Just give us $250 per transaction. And after 20 transactions, it's only $75 per transaction.
So after you pay your cap, basically what they're explaining, after you paid in your $16,000, after that you have a $250 per transaction fee.
Indeed. And after 20, it goes down to 75.
Right. But after you pay in your cap, you're 100% commission. There's no commission split.
Which for the vast majority of agents, you could stop right there.
You could.
Right? You could. I mean, that's definitely more value.
And there's no annual fee and there's no Mickey Mouse fees. It's just straight up. Those are what the numbers are.
Okay. But wait, there's more. Okay. He says, let's help you build wealth a few more ways while we're at it. Now, this is where you and I really resonated with this, because we've always taught having multiple sources of income and saving and getting yourselves ahead. So let's start. And I think we'll probably stop here. And
That's
then
perfect.
We'll continue this tomorrow. Okay. So
cliffhanger.
Time to write down some bullet points, guys. All right. So point number 1, revenue share. Bring agents to EXP, and you'll receive a percentage of the company dollar, this is important because agents get tangled up in that, the company dollar revenue paid from EXP's pocket from their sales activity. It is based on gross commission income, known as GCI, and is dynamically calculated and paid monthly.
Okay, let me explain that.
Yes.
So Keller Williams has innovated the idea of profit share. They're the first that did it. So you introduce an agent to your particular office, and that agent sells a house, and hypothetically you'd be paid off the profit that's determined essentially by the brokerage and essentially
after paying all the costs.
All the costs, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of you just like I've talked to. I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but the essence of it is profits. Your portion of the profits paid on what's left after all the fixed expenses from running the brokerage. Whereas what EXP did, what Glenn Sanford did, because Glenn Sanford was a Keller Williams agent himself, is Glenn said, "What happens if?" Instead of basically diluting the agent's, incentive and basically making it so there really is no incentive for an agent to recruit, because if you're paying them off profit share and there's no profit, because a lot of the, it's very difficult to run a profitable real estate brokerage.
And it's unpredictable. The profit isn't the same every month.
Enter COVID and who knows what, right? So what Glenn did, why don't we start paying agents off the top and be in no dilution? So there's no, when you have, like, let's say, Julie sponsors Tim, right? And Tim sells a house and he gets a $10,000 commission. Now, Tim's on an 80-20 split and all the rest of it, but Julie's revenue share comes off the top, off the company portion of the money that's being paid towards her cap, right?
Which Tim is paying anyway.
Right. So I'm paying my 80-20 split, and Julie's getting paid revenue share based on the actual sale, but it's coming off the cap. It's not in addition to the cap.
It's coming from the revenue.
Right. So I don't have any animosity feelings towards Julie from being my sponsor because I was going to pay it anyway.
Right. It's coming from the company dollar, not from Tim's pocket.
And soon as I cap, there's no more revenue share paid. Once an agent caps, there's no more revenue share on that particular agent.
You've paid in. Okay. So then the point number 2, equity gets stock when there's several different times here. A, you close the first sale each year that you get $200 in stock. B, when the sponsored agent closes their first sale, that's $400 in stock. When you hit an annual cap, you get $400 in stock. And when you reach icon status, $16,000 goes back to you in stock.
Yeah.
And he goes on later to talk about how significant moving the needle is with
he's
that.
oversimplifying it. Yeah. You have to qualify to be icon, and you have to go.
Sure. But a lot of people do, and they get back.
Oh, yeah. So that's the thing. So you go and it's about $80,000 in GCI, and at that point you have paid in your $16,000. And then once you sell an additional 20 units or have a total GCI of $500,000, you qualify for icon, which means if you meet the requirements, which everyone does, it's not like they're trying to prevent you from meeting the requirements, you get your $16,000 back in the form of EXPI stock. That's amazing. Now, Julie and I personally know people, coaching clients we brought to EXP. I mean, I can think of many that have accumulated hundreds of thousands of dollars because ever since 2.5 years ago when we came here and when we went to EXP, they've hit icon every single year.
Yes, you don't do it just once. That's a good point.
Yeah,
you
requalify every year. So every year on your calendar year when you pay in your cap again, you can then qualify again to hit icon.
Indeed. So the next part is take up to 5% of your annual earned commissions in EXP stock at a 10% discount. Now, most EXP agents have that set up to happen automatically at closing. So
that means you get to buy the stock at a discount, and there's no holding term on the stock once you buy it at a discount.
Which is awesome. So that's an insane amount of value that EXP is giving. No competitors come close to giving this much value and ownership to agents. He says, what shareholder in their right mind thinks this is good for them? Low margins and dilution is bad. No, but many great things in life are often unintuitive. Incentives are one. So tomorrow we're going to talk about the value of incentives. I thought he had a really interesting take on that. Because, just what you were talking about, the difference between profit share and revenue share, that profit share really became, it was a big story in the beginning, and then it became like nobody really talks about it anymore because there's not that much profit left over, especially with the erosion of commissions and all that.
But I'm speaking to those of you now who have teams or you have brokerages. You're thinking about starting a team or thinking about starting a brokerage. What EXP does is it creates another effectively passive source of income for you. You get the stock awards for doing what you're already doing. Yes, that's real money. That's right. You get the revenue share from the people basically that you sponsor. That's real money. We're going to talk more about how the revenue share works. But Julie and I, again, know many, many people at EXP. So here's a little statistic for some of you guys. 40%, because, this is very important that people understand this. You'll either think this is a great number, you'll think this is not a great number. Personally, I think it's a great number. 40% of all agents at EXP are receiving revenue share. 40%. Now, remember, EXP is growing by basically close to 100% per year. I mean, not quite, but basically that's a projected, that's the trend right now.
Yep.
So if you have a bunch of agents that have come in and are coming in every single month, thousands are joining every single month, it makes sense that not all of them are sponsoring agents yet.
Sure.
So it makes sense that you're going to see that 40% number increase and more agents are going to see revenue share. And this is the next thing we're going to talk about on the show tomorrow.
Well, and remember, Tim, even if for whatever reason they weren't doing all those other things, for most agents, just the way the commission works is going to be better for them as a starting point.
Oh, for sure.
And then they learn all of the other things, and sometimes I've had some funny experiences where they didn't realize they were awarded at their first closing.
Oh, totally.
And they're like, where'd this stock come from?
Or they sponsored agents and they didn't realize that they got $400 worth of EXPI stock for once that agent sells their first house.
Yeah.
And you have to show them how to log into the interface, and they see like, holy
like a
tamale.
present.
I remember right before the stock split, it was teetering around $150 a share. And I remember agents not knowing how, they never logged in, they never took it seriously.
Right.
And then I showed them how much their shares were worth. They couldn't believe it.
No, they couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
That's a fun call.
And of course, agent brain made them think, well, I'm going to sell it and buy a Corvette. No, you're not.
No, just wait and see.
So what Glenn Sanford and what this model has effectively done is it solved the biggest problems that most agents have. And frankly, it's always about lack of money management. Let's just be honest.
Yeah.
And so EXP is going to create another source of income from the revenue share, but also going to create long-term generational wealth. We're going to pick up where we left off today, tomorrow, and we're going to talk more about what this guy is projecting is going to happen with EXPI. So again, I know some of you are a little bit, maybe put off by this topic. Please don't be. Look at this objection. Help me out here.
Objectively.
Objectively, thanks. We both have a little bit of road brain, sorry.
Yeah, but the thing is, I think that agents that are like, oh gosh, they're talking about EXP again, are the ones that maybe never heard this stuff, is why we're sharing it with them. It's almost like fear or resistance to the unknown. And then when you hear about this, especially coming from somebody that's, we're quoting him. It's not just because we say so. It's not because your friend has been trying to talk to you about it.
So guys, listen, if you want more information on EXP, just go ahead and text EXP to 47372. Is that right? Did I get it right?
I believe so.
Okay.
And
text EXP to 47372, or you can just go to whylibertas.com, WHYLIBERTAS.com. Go to, or just like I said, text EXP to 47372. I'm 99% sure that's right. We're standing in a hotel room right now in Estes Park watching Zoe on her iPad.
Not used to the high elevation.
Exactly. So Julie and I had to take a nap today because we're not used to the thin air.
Walking around.
I mean, my gosh, it's noticeable, right?
It is noticeable. Well, I think, coming from the Caribbean too, we have lack of humidity, we have elevation, very clear air, and very bright skies. So
yes.
We're in a little recovery here.
So hopefully you guys are liking this topic. We're going to pick up tomorrow. And if you guys are ready to join EXP and you're looking for a sponsor that's going to be obviously proactive in helping you build your real estate business and the multifacets that EXP creates for you, Julie and I are formally applying for the job of being your EXP sponsor. Just go to whylibertas.com or just text EXP to 47372. If you're ready to join today, you can just text me directly at 512-758-0206. In the meantime, you guys have a fantastic day. We'll talk with you on the show tomorrow.
This program has been a presentation by Tim and Julie Harris, Real Estate Coaching. For more information on our real estate coaching and training programs, visit our website at timandjulieharris.com. Remember to tune in weekdays at noon for upcoming shows, and until next time, thank you for listening to Real Estate Coaching Radio with Tim and Julie Harris.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.